Archetype Entertainment has kicked off the next stage of their marketing campaign for Exodus, coming out sometime next year. We have content creators getting a look. Here's what I think about that and what I think it means for the game. So if you're one of the Mass Effect fans, or just a gamer in general who has heard about the game Exodus coming out from Archetype Entertainment, you probably saw some cool news this week, and if you didn't, I can bring it to you. So Archetype Entertainment, the new studio, newer studio, this is their first game coming. They're under Hasbro. They are made up mostly of, or at least somewhat of, Mass Effect trilogy veterans, and namely like Drew Karpyshyn, the writer of the original trilogy, and others. It's been a pretty topical game. It got announced years ago at this point at the Game Awards, I believe, and it was this first look at, hey, like, this looks a lot like Mass Effect, and we haven't had much Mass Effect lately, so if you like Mass Effect, be excited for this. And for me, when they first announced Exodus, I was kind of early in my Mass Effect fandom, but it was still interesting because I'm like, well, hopefully they make another Mass Effect game, but that is many years away. Maybe this game is much sooner and will have a similar DNA, a similar feel, since it's from so many of the original creators of Mass Effect. And so over time, Exodus has started to show some more stuff, especially in 2026. They've shown more footage and gameplay than they ever have. If you follow me on this channel or on my social media or my podcasts or streams or whatever, you'll know I've become a little skeptical of the game, to say the least. I don't want to say I'm straight up negative about it, because I want it to be good. I want Exodus to come out and to be like, holy crap, this is the next best thing since Mass Effect. It's just, there's been some decisions and things they've shown that, have lowered my hype a bit, but I'm still very curious about it. And I think a lot of other people are too. And a lot of other people are just straight up hyped because of who's associated with it, what they've shown so far, and what it may be. And that's really cool. I'm really happy for those people. And I hope to be one of you, in the long run. We've had this kind of weird era right now of, we know that somewhere down deep, there's a Mass Effect game being made. Who knows where it's at, or where, what the status is and all that. We also have Exodus, which we've been, following for a while. We have The Expanse: Osiris Reborn, which is fairly new to the table, from Owlcat Games. And they even just recently put out a beta of that where you could play it. It was really just a demo, but they are treating it like a beta by changing some big things. So we're like, we're feasting. If you're a Mass Effect fan or someone who likes those type of games, we're in great company right now. There's a lot of good stuff coming, right? And Exodus is one of those. And the big thing that happened this week was that we saw, some content creators post that Archetype hosted them at their studio to presumably show them some game footage. We know that there's an embargo that I believe is up on June 6th. That came from Kala Elizabeth, a Mass Effect and general gaming content creator. I saw Dantix, who's like kind of an OG Mass Effect and this genre of game creator, Mr. Holton as well. I'm sure there's been others, but those are the only ones I saw, and that's cool. Now, they're going to bring in friendly faces, right? Like, they obviously aren't going to bring in someone who they think is going to be in any way, shape, or form critical about what they're doing. That doesn't mean there won't be criticisms from the people who they brought. But from my own experience, you get shown these kind of things, you get shipped off to these cool experiences, and you want to be objective, or as much as you can, but you also get a little starstruck by everything and all that. And so, you can look at it, I guess, pessimistically like that, like, oh, they're just bringing in people to glaze the game. And they are, like, I still think I was able to remain as objective as I could, but that doesn't mean it's not a bad thing. Them bringing in these content creators who I'm fairly certain all three of them that I know of, if they saw a disaster on June 6th, when they're allowed to talk about it, they would tell us they saw a disaster. They wouldn't have brought them in if that's what was going to happen, right? This, to me, is, even as someone who's kind of skeptical about Exodus, tells me that Archetype is confident in what they're making, is confident in where they're at. And we're talking the game, I believe, is at least a year out, if, maybe more, maybe a little bit less. It's done, right? Like Exodus as a whole should be content complete. It should be basically done. and then they're filling in the gaps. There's whether it's bugs or just finishing touches on animations, environments, cinematics, voice acting, maybe re-recording some voice acting if there's things they didn't like, and there will be some feedback from these content creators who have come to get to see it. If there's significant things that they noticed and all agreed on, we'll probably see them changing those things. We may never know it happened because of how this all works, but even as someone who is kind of skeptical of the game and not as hyped as I was at one point for it, I will say that them bringing in people to look at it in their home territory this early does tell me that things are probably in pretty good shape. Some of the things I've been worried about is that, like them losing one of their co-founders like a year away from the game releasing was weird. This is James Olin. He's formerly of BioWare back in 2018. We've recently gotten stories from him about why he left. And, I don't think that his the things that he said were quite as damning as some people made them. But then he also talked about leaving Archetype before they even released their first game, and how it kind of seems like he thought, and I think this happens a lot, these AAA developers who work under these huge publishers, under these known studios like a BioWare, they assume all the problems at BioWare or in AAA are because they are under a publisher like EA and stuff. And that's probably pretty true in a lot of ways. But, we've seen this time and time again now where, these people, they get their pension or they get their, they cash out their stock and they have a ton of money and they're able to use some of that to start their own studio. And especially in the last, 5-10 years, they start that new studio. They want to do the things they were doing before at a AAA level on a AAA budget, but they want to do them like an indie studio where it's a small team and they're agile and they're tight knit and everyone has a voice. And I think what pretty much has always happened is they get into it, they realize that it's not that simple. It wasn't just EA's fault that things are hard, that making games was challenging, and and that's kind of how the cookie crumbles with that. So, we've seen this happen time and time again. It looks like Archetype is at least going to be one of the lucky studios in this situation that will release a game. Many of the studios who have tried to do what they're doing never did, including studios for people like Casey Hudson and others. And so it's interesting. I take this as a good sign. My heart is open to Exodus being a really awesome game. It's just the way that they've pushed a lot of merch and a lot of just like transmedia stuff, of books and audiobooks and board games, and really like kind of selling the cart before the horse, right? And we need to see the horse, and we've seen more of the game. They've released almost weekly, I think at this point, for weeks now, these like 1-minute clips of the video game, of the actual game being played. I think, it's scripted. It's, they're showing the best parts possible, right? But they've shown a variety of environments and gameplay elements and things like that. We also know that here in a week or two, they're going to be at one of the big game showcases. And we assume, I'm going to guess, we're going to see like a 5-minute clip of the game, hopefully with, dialogue, combat, seeing how this game actually plays. While I have skepticism, the main part of my skepticism is that, during the development of this game, they've spoken so big about their ambitions and their vision for Exodus and how it's going to be a game that takes place over, multiple generations and in the time dilation mechanics. And, you're going to jump way ahead in the future and the choices you made will change how, that all sounds really cool. But, we have to be realistic too. Like, it's probably going to be a game in 3 acts. It's probably going to be 3 acts that take place in different time frames, and the choices you make in each act are going to affect what the next act looks like or the end of the game looks like. Like, we're probably not looking at a situation where in one playthrough you span 20,000 years, and then another playthrough you only span 200 years, right? It's probably going to be more linear than maybe the vision was, because what always happens with these, especially these studios that branch off of kind of old school AAA publishers, and they want to do their own thing. They have these grand visions that they'll do something different, and at the end of the day, games are just kind of made the way they're made, right? And I think that's what we're going to end up seeing with Exodus. That doesn't mean it's going to be bad. Doesn't mean it's going to be disappointing. They have a lot of room to do some really cool stuff with that. I just want to see that. Like, I want to see something finally where I'm like, this doesn't just look like modern Andromeda. I like Andromeda, Mass Effect Andromeda. I think is a good game. Not the best game in the world, but it's fine. And this game is giving me big Andromeda vibes, and that's okay. If it's as good as Andromeda, it's the first game from a new studio in a tough genre to make, in a time where it's tough to make these single player new IPs. If it can be as good as Andromeda, that's a victory. If it's better, great. If it's worse, sucks, but they may be fine, even if it's not the best game in the world. So if you haven't been paying attention to Exodus, I have been, even with my kind of state, the way I think about it. Them bringing in content creators is a really good thing. Just look for the objective stuff when, these content creators and other ones who I don't know about. Look for the objective stuff too, like when they talk about game structure, when they talk about mechanics, when they talk about conversation systems and relationship systems and how all that stuff works. Like that's the stuff to really look for, because that's going to be new info for us. I don't think we may even get during their showcase. So if you're an Exodus fan, if you're pumped for it, it's probably good times coming. They're probably going to be hitting the marketing button quite a bit here in the next year as they ramp up to release this new IP from a new studio. And if you're someone like me who's a little skeptical, I think that skepticism will be tested. And I hope that it obliterates it. And I come out the other end of this being like, I was such a dummy. I should have been pumped for this. So that's what we have right now. I'll cover more as we get more. The next couple of weeks are going to be crazy. We have all these showcases coming, and hopefully we see stuff from The Expanse, from Exodus, from Mass Effect, and I'll be here to cover it all. So subscribe to the channel if you want all of that. Hit the like button so more people see the video. Leave a comment down below with how you're feeling about Exodus, or maybe if I missed any other content creators who Archetype hosted. Consider becoming a YouTube member if you want videos like this one just a bit early, as well as some other perks and my entire, just my thankfulness. Check out the links in the description of the video for my other content and other ways to support what I'm doing here. That's all I've got for this one. So until next time.